How's it going, everybody? This is Luka, and I am back finally and literally with another episode of Sabres Chat. This is episode 21, I believe, in the short yet long ish history of Sabres Chat, presented by Built in Buffalo. It's good to be back. Had a little bit of a hiatus over in the UK. I was going to record this at my usual Wednesday night time following the Sabres Flyers game. And I'll be honest, I hit a little bit of a jet lag wall, being that at the point then when the game was over, it was about 9:30 or so. My body clock was saying it was 1:30 a.m. Was a little tired. Um, and I can tell you full transparency that still haven't fully adjusted here. I'm recording this early on Thursday morning. It has not even become light outside, although I do have the blinds closed because I believe light will be coming through shortly to help with lighting for now. But I wanted to say that since I was here, or since last episode, which was recorded on a Friday morning following the season and home opener for the Sabres against the Rangers with that disappointing outing, there's been just a few hockey games since. We are now at the 10-game mark for the Sabres. And it's been an interesting ride, both for myself as a fan trying to keep up, especially once, excuse me, when you're on UK time, and then also for the team itself, where we have kind of seen an up and down already with the season. And I'll get into a point on, where are we at so far in the 10 games thing. I think that's a big theme of this episode, which hopefully I will keep nice and short and sweet. But I definitely want to dive into the most recent couple games that we've seen out of the Sabres, being last night. Since I said I'm recording this Thursday morning, last night the Sabres did win what's was a rare game where they definitely were outplayed if you hit the scoreboard, and yet they found a way to win, being outshot 40-15 and finding themselves up on the scoreboard with a 5-2 result. And then the game prior, which was probably the most complete game to date for the Sabres, where they outshot the Avs 29-23 and essentially controlled the game from start to finish to have UPL's first shutout of his career in a 4-0 win at home. So I'm going to talk about those games. But as I said, the overall theme of this episode and the title of the banner you'll see and everything in that variation is we are now through 10 games of the season. And how are we feeling about the team? How am I feeling about the team? Where do things stand right now with this team? And overall, I would say right now, it's been hard to follow closely game by game while I was over in the UK. Luckily for myself, the Colorado game, which I was able to watch in full, was a matinee effort. It was at 1 p.m. local here in the States. It was 5 p.m. in the UK. At least it was at a manageable time that I could watch it. And then, of course, last night, the last two games that I've been able to watch in full, the Sabres look like they have it going. Their feet are moving well on all lines, on all fronts. And what I will say is, based on the extended rewatches that I've been able to try to watch when I was overseas on the other games, it didn't seem like they were getting that effort from all four lines in those previous games. I think you would see flashes and things like that. And I'm going to get into a couple players that obviously have been kind of even through the downs that have occurred already in this 10-game stretch so far. There have been other ones that haven't, sunk and haven't, underperformed like some of the others, and find themselves still thriving right now through the 10 games. So overall, I think what's happened recently and then through the 10 games is we've had this up and down. There's been a few guys that have been good, other guys that have, it's taken a little bit to work into the season. But overall, this team is not letting losses stack up, which is nice. The effort might have not been there from top to bottom, but they're still trying to, the effort level as a whole, as a team, I feel like is there. For instance, I know in the extended watch, the Montreal game that they played on Monday, the 23rd, they lost that game 3-1. But it really, if you take away the scoreboard opposite, like the Philly game we experienced last night, it definitely felt like the Sabres were the better team on the night effort wise. it wasn't in the cards to get the result, to get it done for whatever reason. And then, it's just been one of those things where I think they've been up and down up to that point. They shuffled the lines of recent, and for instance, they broke up Skinner, Tage, and Tuck. They've spread that love around, and you've reaped the benefits from that, I believe, because you've introduced different combinations, different play styles for those three guys. For instance, you have Tage still as your top center. Casey's moved up to the second line center. Dylan has gone down to third line center with Tuck on his wing. Skinner is there with Casey. And then you have kind of these high effort guys, a JJ Paterka, who I feel like you don't hear discussed enough, but he's putting in a really solid season so far, being the opposite of Jeff Skinner and centered by Casey Middlestat. That second line is doing wonders right now. And I'll get into the guy who I've enjoyed the most so far this season as a whole. And then Alex Tuck, who's, taken a while to get into it. I think he's benefited from dropping down, having a Dylan Cousins, more of a workhorse center for him to match the energy that he tries to put out there. And a Tyson Yost, who's willing to do anything for the team kind of deal, get the dirty work done. I think he's done a great job there. And then also with Tage, for instance, you still have a physical effort there with length and size in Jordan Greenway. And then you just kind of had a mixed effort on the opposite wing that I think Tage can elevate and help just due to the attention he commands and everything of that nature. So I think the shaking up of lines has really helped steady things out a little bit of late. And then through the back end of the 10 game stretch, and we got back to 500 here, sitting at 5-5 due to those two games I referenced with beating the Avs and then beating the Flyers last night. I think what we're seeing is by spreading the wealth in that, that top trio that we've had for the past couple of years, all of a sudden you've seen the effort level from first line to fourth line, kind of be at a high end across the board. And it's, really benefited everyone. And I will say this, it's benefited the blue line as well, because essentially you don't have a third line that's just loose, uninspiring, lack of effort, whatever you want to say. And I'm not trying to say that in too negative of a way, but where it basically leaves the blue line dry and open. And unfortunately for the Sabres, still to this point, I will say the blue line is not the strongest of defensive effort and minded individuals. I think they still have, holes that can be exploited on the blue line, even with your Dahleens and your Owen Powers. And if you have a third line that's just not putting the forecheck and the effort up front to kind of help and assist with that overall team defense, it leaves them exposed time and time again. And then eventually they just get broken down and, exposed for all of those things. So I think what we're seeing is by spreading that love, you spread the energy among the four different lines, that it's really helping out with the team defense as a whole, helping the blue line, and you're getting a much better team effort in front of whoever's in net, which is another story about this. Your Devin Levi started the season. He didn't start as well as what we saw at the end of last season. He gets hurt, unfortunately. It looks like he's, on the road back and could be back hopefully soonish. Comrie had a good effort on the island, but then, suffered that loss in Montreal, and I believe also was hurt. And then from there, UPL has kind of been in the net and steadying the ship. Maybe the injury happened with Ottawa game. I can't remember where the injury happened, because again, that was right in that stretch where I wasn't able to watch full games, being that they were, puck drop was at 120 or 105 local, time or whatever from where I was. So unfortunately, it's very difficult to stay up for those. So UPL's been in there, and early on you had your 6-4 win against Ottawa, your 5-4 loss at New Jersey. And it was kind of that old Sabres hockey that we saw, where it's very loose. Team defense was secondary. It's just, high flying, but at the same time, you're not helping goalie. You're not helping your blue line be able to manage the game at all. And it's wide open to a fault. So then by Granato shaking up the lines, moving players around, everything like that, I think we've seen, an overall better team defensive effort out of this team in the first 10 games now, especially on the tail end, of course, where it gives you promise now sitting there at 5-5 that they have steadied the ship right now, it seems like. And then as they get into the future stretch of games, starting with Friday at home against Philadelphia, wearing the goat heads, of course, they can really start turning it up a little bit. They do have some tough games coming up after that Philly one, at Toronto, at Carolina, so on and so forth. So it's a good time to seem like they've steadied the ship, shaking up the lines, and it seems to be clicking, things like that, and everything's good. I definitely want to get into a couple players that I've noticed, even in the rougher parts of this opening 10 games, have still looked very, very good. And honestly, first and foremost, I've tweeted about him a couple times when I've had the opportunity and what I've seen, and we see it every night at this point. I think he's playing at a high level regularly and consistently right now for this team, and it's definitely a good time when it comes to his contract situation and where he stands as a player in the league, to be doing this. But Casey Middlestat is just I think he's continuously showing this year how per, how important he is to this lineup and how important to have that third center that truly can put in great minutes no matter where he's slotted. Currently in the second line, he's been as low as the third line, of course. And then even late last year when Tage was dealing with the injury and the season was seemingly over, or seemingly or literally, playoff hopes wise, that he then slid up to the top line, centering your Tuck and Skinner, and he can perform at that high end level with a lot of different things. You just need to give him kind of one guy that can give him a little bit of space. Whereas last season, he was basically playing the entire season with Olofsson, who's not the worst of players, but he's not going to give you high effort and, high octane kind of skating out there. He's a point man. He's just going to sit there and wait for his shot. So you're already kind of down one skater on the ice when it comes to an effort level. You need to have two guys that are willing to skate and do their part and do their work. And I think even as, high scoring and everything that it comes with Jeff Skinner, I still think he puts in a great effort, night in, night out. And then JJ Peterka is also a high energy guy, willing to skate around, willing to do some things for this team and for that line, that it opens up space for Casey Middlestat to truly shine with his hands, with his ability to hold the puck in tight spaces, move it around, create angles and open up angles to then move the puck either to shoot and or to pass to an open shot. Um, I think Casey Middlestat has thrived in this opening 10, and I think this could be a big year for him, which is great for him and his business side of stuff, but also just him as a player to see him continue to progress. I think he's doing great. Overall, he is currently 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points total, and a +3. When you look at your top point guys real quick, your Jeff Skinner, who has 5 goals, 5 assists, which is your leader in the clubhouse right now at 10 points. He's a -1. Tage Thompson, 5 goals, 4 assists. He's 0 plus minus. Just under Casey Middlestat. Casey Middlestat also at 9 points. Rasmus Dahlin is at 2 goals, 7 assists. He's a -1. Dylan Cousins, 3 goals, 4 assists, -1. All the top point guys, only one guy truly is standing out there when it comes to a plus minus. And I think that's a big thing for him. And also in limited minutes as well. Your Skinner has 17.21 average. Tage with 19.23. Your Dahlin, of course, is a workhorse at 24.12. Casey Middlestat is only getting around 16.21 right now a game, and he's putting in maximum effort, maximum output for what he's doing. He has been incredible for this team continuously. He's got a shooting percentage right now of 23, as he only has 13 shots on goal, with 3 of those being goals themselves. I mean, he has been doing very, very well for himself. I think he deserves to be kind of my number one highlighted guy. In all honesty, I've loved everything I've seen out of Casey Middlestat so far this season. I hope he continues to grow on this. I think having, a Skinner and Peterka, that second line to me has been very, very good these last couple games. I think those 3 work very, very well together. I think they complement each other very well. I'm happy to see it because I love Casey Middlestat at his peak. When you see him at his best, he is so much fun to watch. He's so good. His hands are unbelievable, top tier in this league. It's nice to see him all put it all together and kind of really start to show that he's a true quality player for this lineup, and potentially is going to get a payday, or at least, get locked up on this team to be part of this team moving forward, with hopefully great things to come with the lineup at their age and everything of that, of course, where we project them to be, hopefully sooner rather than later. Another guy I want to talk about, though, that I didn't mention that in the plus minus conversation, but is the leader in your clubhouse when it comes to the plus minus right now for the Buffalo Sabres, and that is Owen Power. Now, Owen Power has 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. He has 6 points on the season. He is a +9. He is 3 ahead of your number 2, which is Henry Yokiharu. Shout out to him. I think he started a little rough. I think he was kind of just the player he was. I don't mean it, rough as in he's been worse. I just think he wasn't what he was what he's been. But he's definitely seemed of late to pick up things a little bit. But Owen Power, to me, he gets his first goal of the year last night in Philadelphia. What an absolute snipe that shot was. And that was such an important shot, of course, in that game that gets them the lead in the third period, and they're able to take it from there. But Owen Power has been great. And I think the best part about that, too, is I would say opening night at least. He was hit or miss. I think he had a couple really good plays and really good puck moving opportunities in a defensive zone and also in the neutral zone. I think he was doing a couple things really well, but then he also had a lot of mishaps in my mind in the defensive side where he just wasn't reading the game right. He wasn't taking the right angle to attack the puck in a corner, for instance. I remember one kind of vividly just because it was in front of me based on where I was sitting for that game. And he was, up and down. It was the first game of the season, so on and so forth. You kind of just do what it is. But I think he's really started to turn it on of late. The plus minus means, he's just being very sound, him and his partner. The silent kind of star and all of this too. I think that's helping Owen Power even thrive more is we've really seen a lot of good leadership and just play in general out of Eric Johnson on the blue line. It's not like Eric Johnson's been out there with him, of course. And, Eric Johnson's just got a goal, no assists, -2. It's not like his stats are showing he's great. But Eric Johnson, you can see things both when he's talking to the media, but then even, while he's getting those limited minutes on the ice, that he has looked very good for this team. And that signing is definitely something that shouldn't be overlooked for this team. I think will help them continue to, turn things around, get things going this season, and is helping, the likes of Owen Power, I think, elevate their game even more so and kind of help them through this. Owen Power has looked very good. He looked great last night in my mind. Of course, the goal kind of helps. But overall, I think he's another guy that I definitely wanted to shout out right now. Leader in the clubhouse of the plus minus again with a +9 so far. So shout out him. I did have Henry Yokiharu. Of course, Jeff Skinner being, 5 goals, 5 assists. He's come out the gates hot. He looks very, very good. He looks like, he's essentially has an opportunity to score every night. He takes advantage of it half of the time, obviously, being 5 goals in 10 games, 10 points on the season. Jeff Skinner's looked very, very good. I think having a guy like Middlestat, of course, helps him, but it's not like he didn't get that help with Tage Thompson. Jeff Skinner seems to be molding into a guy, molding, that's a weird word for a 30-year-old in the league, 31-year-old, I should say. But Jeff Skinner is it a guy right now where he still can play at a high level. He can still play with, on different lines, different combinations, and still get opportunities to score. He's just somehow always creative with the puck, and his skating primarily, of course. But you give him one talented winger and or center that can open things up and give him an opportunity or two more on the night, and he will absolutely thrive, whether that's Tage Thompson, whether that's, Casey Middlestat. We've seen it obviously in the past back in the Eichel era, when you give him a high caliber center like Eichel, as long as you give him one partner on the ice that can open up space, create lanes, create passing lanes, and things like that to then get the puck to Skinner, you're going to see a high end offensive output. And right now he has hit the ground running in the goal scoring category and has looked great. Overall with this team, though, really, Philly last night, it was nice. I will say this. It was nice to play a game of recent where you take away the scoreboard and it definitely seemed like the effort wise and just play overall, the Sabres were outplayed, or they will say the quote unquote didn't deserve to win and yet found a way to win and win handedly for the most part. 5-2 is definitely a handed score, although it was 3-2 like the 13-minute mark of the third period. So, it was a close game up until late, but it was nice to win one of those games. And then the game prior, you see a 4-0 shutout. Lukanen looked real good in net. He looked good in net, obviously, last night as well. I believe it was a 30-save performance. Um, things are clicking for people at the right time. And Lukanen right now is going to make it difficult, especially for whenever Levi is ready to go, to come back and claim the net. And good for Lukanen. Good for a guy who on opening night, Devin Levi gets just, and obviously in the preseason, even it was just Devin Levi's net. That is Devin Levi's. And then Comrie is being made the backup. So Lukin is getting healthy scratched every night. And for a young goalie who wants to be playing in this league, I can understand how that could be very tough. And for him to sit there and just wait for an opportunity, finally get that opportunity due to unfortunate circumstances, of course, but then come in and look good. After, I would say more of what we've seen in the past out of him when it comes to the Ottawa game and then the New Jersey game, where I don't think he played extremely poor, but there was maybe one or two goals where you wish, he would have come up with a save there instead. And then on top of it, it's not like he did anything to really make you go, wow, in those games. But then in the Colorado game and then last night at Philly, I think he's elevated a little bit and he's shown um, overall better output and better performances than what we've seen in the past out of him, where he can still get you through. He can still, like, I would always call him like kind of a low end starter in the league. Um, at a decent backup, low end starter if needed kind of deal. That's kind of where I've always thought about him. And right now he's just taking advantage of the opportunity, really putting in good performances overall, and he's going to make it difficult for Granato and the coaching staff to kind of hand the net back over to Levi if he continues to perform the way he did these last couple of games. So good for him. It's cool to see players like that kind of step up when given an opportunity and perform. But overall, I like going back to the 10 game subject. I like where the Sabres are at this point through 10 games. I'll be honest. Would we have liked a better start? Of course, you always would like a better start. But as we've seen last year, you can start out really, really hot in October, and then all of a sudden an 8-game loss streak in November can basically kill your season and just make it a very hard uphill climb to get into the postseason, which they gave their best effort to and made it very, very close last season. If they can now go through this November stretch and not have something like they had occur last November. They've only had 1 2-game losing streak right now, and that was the opening 2 games of the season, the home opener against New York Rangers and then at the Islanders a couple of nights later. If they can get through November, especially through some tough stretches where you have, at Toronto, at Carolina, I mentioned, just looking at the schedule right now, you host Boston and then go to Winnipeg. You have a road trip in there. I mean, at Chicago and at Washington, do those seem difficult on paper? No, you should be able to win those games. But once you start getting in the later half of a travel schedule where it's a Friday in Winnipeg, then a Sunday in Chicago, and then a Wednesday in Washington, decent amount of travel in there. Hopefully they can make it through those kinds of things without letting losses, kind of stack up. And then you also have a stretch later on at the end of November where it's at New Jersey, at the Rangers, at St. Louis, at Carolina. Like that's the beginning of December to roll it into that. I mean, that's another difficult stretch. If you can just not have losses stack in this month, like we saw last year, where you had 8-game stretch of just loss after loss, and you can muscle through this, get to the month of December where, the Sabres definitely started clicking and turning things on, and do so again where you have a couple games against Arizona who, look, props to Arizona. They've looked decent early on in the season. They're exciting to watch for sure. Logan Cooley, shout out you, man. You look good. First NHL goal of your career last night against the Ducks in an overtime loss. You have some games there. You got a game at Vegas, of course, the defending Cup champs, but you get to December, you didn't let losses stack. If you can, try to get a couple games over 500, manage things, figure things out, and continue to steady the ship and move it forward. I think that there's great things to come for this team. I think they're starting to click and starting to figure it out, of course. So overall, I think there's good things to like with this opening 10-game stretch. It didn't look the greatest early on. First 4, you're 1-3 with your only win being an overtime win at home against Tampa. It wasn't the greatest of starts, but they've righted the ship in my mind. It looks like they're going to move forward in a positive direction. And overall, I am happy with where they're sitting right now. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm glad to be back. I'm back stateside and everything of that nature. It's good to be back. I will be back next week, and we will be on a weekly schedule finally once again for Sabres Chat. I appreciate you once more for stopping by and listening in and tuning in. let me know in the comments below, how you're feeling about the season, any thoughts, anything like that. I always like to try to, read any comments that are left and reply and stuff like that. Conversation is always fun. Be sure to follow myself on Twitter, which I am just really realizing if you are watching on YouTube is not on the screen. There it is. Follow me on Sabres Chat Pod if you want for any updates. I try to tweet as best I can. It's been a little difficult the past couple of weeks, of course, being over the pond, but I like to tweet during games. And then if you got any thoughts and stuff like that, feel free to interact. Be sure to also follow, if you're not already, at Bills Chat Pod for all your Bills stuff. My co-host with Bills Chat Podcast and Bills Chat Live, Josh, runs that account primarily. I do, stop in once in a while myself, but we love interaction. We like to be a nice, fun space for all your Bills content needs and everything like that. And Josh is extremely active on that Twitter, of course. So if you like a little bit of fun, if you like a little bit of updates and all of that stuff, we love to bring that to you at Bills Chat Pod. I am Luka. You all have a great rest of your day whenever you're watching and or listening to this. This is Sabres Chat presented by Built in Buffalo. Take care.